Let's bring in our first panel tonight, Deputy Executive Director at the IPA, Daniel Wild, and Chief of Staff for Pauline Hanson's One Nation, James Ashby. Welcome to you both. Let's start on the economy. Treasurer again out today, claiming the government spending is not driving up inflation as Labor considers taking additional power bill cuts to the election, although he said there that that might not now happen. He has admitted businesses will need to help pull the nation out of the worst economic slump since the recession in the 1990s. But it's all spin from Jim Chalmers. The OECD, as we know, you've both seen this, called on Australia's federal and state governments to rein in spending. Good luck with that in places like Victoria. James, what do you make of... They're trying to sneak through to an election, it would appear to me, and pretend that nothing is their fault.
I've always said that, you know, politics is much like farming. If you prepare and get the groundwork right, anything will grow. And unfortunately, this is a government that's gone out there with a 1,000-litre pot of Roundup and just dumped it on the paddock and said to businesses, go and grow something. I'm sorry, you've destroyed the fertile ground that previous governments have left. And this is the issue that a lot of businesses face today. They just don't want to go and invest money, knowing very well that money in the bank there is safer than putting money into a business because the government keep moving the goalposts. And it's not just business facing this, it's people at home with their self-managed super funds. As we've seen, the goalposts just keep moving. So there's a great deal of concern out there in the business world. And what right does a government have to come and destroy all that good work and then lean on the very industries that you've put under all this great immense pressure? Not a good look.
Daniel, I mean, I made the point there in the opening that what the opposition leader Peter Dutton needs to keep doing, and all of his front bench, is just keep repeating the question, do you feel better now than you felt 2.5 years ago? Now, Labor promised that we would feel better. Labor promised we'd have cheaper power. Labor said the other mob have screwed it up. They got voted out. But does anyone feel like we're in a better position than we were before Anthony Albanese won?
Well, you're bang on. I think the only people that are better off are public servant bureaucrats and big corporates, because if you're in a small business or the private sector, or someone living in the suburbs or regions, you're going backwards. As you pointed out in your monologue and as you just had on the screen before, we're now in 7 consecutive quarters of negative per capita economic growth, which is the longest decline to living standards since digitised records began in the early 1970s. So we are in Whitlam territory. This is something that we've been pointing out now for months. And the problem, Steve, is that this is a redistributionist government, not a growth government. It's a Whitlam government, not a Hawke government. It's focused on sectional interest, not the national interest. And that's why it's not achieving community support for its initiatives. The only lever that they're pulling for economic growth is this mass migration program. And of course, more people means a bigger economy. It means you have a bigger pie, but the slice of that pie is getting smaller in terms of what Australians are getting in their back pockets. And that's what our lived experience is. When people are driving around, taking their kids to school, trying to access basic social services, it's much harder today than it used to be because this program hasn't been planned for, and now the chickens are coming home to roost.
James, Daniel and I have the misfortune of living in the great socialist state of Victoria. The comparisons between the Andrews-Allen government and the Albanese-Chalmers government are starting to become crystal clear. I mean, the spending that knows no end, regardless of the state of the economy. I mean, you've got Victorians paying $26 million a day in interest on the debt of Victoria. I fear, James, that the socialist left Victorian government, the one in Canberra, is starting to look just as bad as the one that Daniel and I have to live under.
Well, we know all about the predicament that you're living under down there in Victoria, because so many Victorians are actually making the move to Queensland. In fact, there's been plenty of reports in the last couple of weeks in our Queensland paper here, the Courier Mail, suggesting, and I know firsthand just talking to people here on the streets of Yeppoon, they're coming from down south. And they know they've got a better lifestyle here because they can buy a house much cheaper. Our environment's a hell of a lot better. You can actually use the days a whole lot better. And you're not paying just countless taxes. Look at the land tax that people in Victoria have had imposed upon them. There's just tax after tax after tax coming the way of Victorians. Now, I'm not suggesting I want all the Victorians to move up here, because I don't want your voting pattern up here in Queensland. Only come up here if you're a Conservative, OK? You're welcome, Steve. You can come up any time. Dan, you're welcome too, mate. But as for the others that voted this Labor government in, stay down there. You voted them in, you deal with it, because we don't want you up here wrecking our state.
Yeah, I don't think there'll be too many Victorians who'll be voting Labor again in the short term. Daniel, just on the Victorian government, it's reported today that they paid consultants, you won't believe this, $2 million. They got these consultants from interstate, paid them $2 million to advise them on how can we raise more revenue, how can we get out of the debt spiral that we're in, and it included a possible asset sale list. The State Treasury's annual report confirms this mob, Sydney-based group called Ad Astra Corporate Advisory, good luck to them, was paid $1.7 million last financial year and $319,000 this year for, quote, commercial and transaction advice. I mean, seriously? How many public servants have we got living and working in Victoria appointed by Dan Andrews, and they've got to go outsource to get advice on how they can get more money off taxpayers?
Well, exactly right. I mean, the only growth industry in Victoria is the public servant industry. I've got to say, Steve, that I've also jumped ship from Victoria. I didn't go north. I went west into South Australia, but I'm happy to take up the offer to head up to sunnier Queensland in the future for sure. And just like thousands of people that are getting out of the state, you'll be the only one left, Steve, soon. So. But it's a real issue when they say they want, revenue raising options. You know what that's code for? More taxes and higher taxes. I think they're running out of things in this state to tax, Steve. It's the highest taxing state, highest debt state, highest spending in terms of the growth of that spending. We put out a report about 4 or 5 months ago showing Victoria was at the bottom of the economic league ladder across Australia. It's good to see the Business Council twigged on that earlier this week and reinforced what we had done earlier. And the reality is that you ask any small business owner, Steve, do you reckon things are easier or harder today than they were 3 or 5 or 10 years ago? And I could tell you 99 times out of 100 what the answer to that is, because of the energy prices that are going up and the taxes that we just mentioned, but also just the stifling green tape and red tape, the native title they've got to contend with. It's almost impossible to get ahead and employ people in Victoria anymore, and that's why businesses are leaving the state.
Yeah, look, I was speaking to a guy today, admittedly very well-off guy, but his land tax bill on his house that is not his main house in the city was $150,000 a year he's got to pay in land tax.
Wow.
James, I want to talk to you about what happened in court up in Queensland today. Teenage boy, 13 years old, he crashed a stolen car. He's 13 when he did this. He's now 15. He killed 3 women. He's been sentenced to 6 years detention. He'll never spend a day in an adult prison. The family spoke to the media this afternoon. As you would imagine, they're pretty unhappy. Have a look.
It was going to be a small sentence, but we were just hoping for more.
He doesn't feel remorse. 0.
Absolutely disgraceful, that sentence. James, it highlights, doesn't it, the urgency of the new Premier Crisafulli's adult crime, adult time laws. They need to become, I mean, they're not retrospective, but he needs to get them in quickly.
Well, I'm glad you've got more confidence in them than I do, Steve, because at the end of the day, you can put all the legislation through the parliament that you like, but it comes down to the judge and implementing those laws. Look, this is a light sentence. I keep saying this. I want to see inside these courtrooms, blow these kids' faces out, but I want to know, as a member of the public, why these judges are coming up with these determinations. Surely I'm missing something. Are you missing something? Because if I had my way, I'd shake the living hell out of these kids and say, why did you do this to start with? I don't know. Maybe times have changed. I remember, mate, we had no interest in stealing cars. We had an interest in getting on dirt bikes when we were kids. We used to ride out in the forestry, we'd ride in mates' paddocks, and, it was on us if we wrapped ourselves around a tree. But these kids today just clearly have no sense of responsibility, they have no sense of care, and they have no healthy fear of the law or parents anymore. I don't know what's going wrong, but we've got to come up with a better solution, and these judges have got to have a better understanding of what the public expect from them when it comes to sentencing.
James, the kid was out on bail. He'd been already charged with being found driving a car at 216 kilometres an hour. He was on bail when he killed these women.
And the other issue is the judge made a point of saying he had a clean history, no criminal record. That's just right. That's a slap in the face. It's a spit in the face, actually. It's more insulting than a slap. It's a spit in the face of these poor people that had to be in that courtroom, that have lost loved ones. And this has impacted on a community. We lost 3 decent women, but we lost one with so many skill sets there. She was a nurse. I just hope this kid, in some way, shape or form, can be reformed in the prison system. And I hope he turns out to be something like a paramedic or a doctor or something in the future. I don't have much hope there, but look, hopefully someone gets him and remoulds him, because he's on a pathway to nowhere at this current rate.
Yeah, I love your optimism. I don't think that's going to happen. Just before we go, Daniel, very quickly, the Prime Minister's Department, this shows how out of touch these people are. The PM's Department spent $20,000 on flowers and paid Jessica Malboy $44,000 to sing a couple of songs at the ASEAN summit back in March. Some of the items the taxpayers were slugged for: a 12-metre-long flower arrangement for the Great Hall dinner table worth $7,260. This is the bloke who, spent $4.5 million on a beach house, and he's got his department spending $44,000 to have someone sing a song.
Yeah, I don't know why they can't do these things on Zoom, Steve. I mean, look, I'm all in favour of, trade and negotiations, but do we really need a big international knees up, particularly at the times that we're in at the moment? So I think it just captures the out-of-touch nature of the government. I don't think that people begrudge having conferences if they're going to be productive, but again, you've got to look at where you can cut back on these expenses. And it is a very bad sign and a bad, I think, look for the government, particularly at this time when they're putting more money into the economy, fueling inflation. Jim Chalmers is having an argument with the RBA governor, and then the news about this comes out, so it certainly can't help him.
I can't sing, but I might go into the florist business, I reckon. Daniel and James, thank you very much, guys. We'll catch up with you soon. Now, coming up after the break,